Mod. Och,
yeah, I'm back again. Exactly.
you did it. That's fun. Yeah, obviously. I've done the wrong name for the YouTube channel.
Everybody next year, we're going to.
No, we're going to Dubai next year, everybody.
Sam. Too much
Yeah.
time.
Just stay here then.
Huh?
Just stay here. You get to do what they have a flat roof.
Everywhere is also.
They have a flat roof here, they wouldn't
Have a flat roof here.
they get a flat roof, they want to get a flat roof, they didn't know what to do, so it's not make it so easy.
You need to do a bit hard next year.
First the Berlin again, no?
Yeah,
That was beautiful. That.
Absolutely.
That was the most beautiful ride out of all of them.
What was?
Scared to mention it as well.
Just do it.
That was
Okay.
such a beautiful route. The last
Say
bit
that-
wasn't so nice. The first, well, everybody moaned about it wasn't as fun.
Good evening, everybody. No. Arranged only with the number of sheep that we gave to Esau, but over thousands of years, all the children and all the descendants would also come back. And the medrash which is not with how much precision, how much bandwidth, so then you know, this is better. So, okay, how much that's what she asked me. A few bit. She said one other line which I really liked is that she said that she used to have crazy people. So she said the truth about it is everybody's crazy. It's just a matter of degrees. Okay. You should live to Yerushalayim. Should live to. It's a book. It's a very sweet book. Okay. Go up to the Mishnah Daf Tessa with the Dikas Chametz. Says the Mishnah, "Ein Choshen, we're not concerned. Shema, perhaps Giro Chulda, that we now bread. We buy the bottom. Don't be concerned that let's say you did B'dikas Chametz. After you did B'dikas Chametz, maybe the mouse moved it from room to room, and then thereby you haven't done your job properly. Now, Tosis straight away. Let's see the top Tosis. Tosis asks that the Mishnah says it. Why? Because the Mishnah, the first Mishnah Now Masechta said that if you take Chametz, you only have to look for Chametz where? Oh, a place where you normally bring Chametz into. Now, if the place. Says the Tosfos, of course you don't, because the first Mishnah told us that. Now, I apologize for the disconnection and I thank Moshe for. There was a couple of people on. We're gone off and it's Melech's come back on. Not sure what happened. I have to tell them that. Okay, it's bad. I'll eventually have it. It's gone back on. So that's what Tosfos says, that you can't bring a raya from our first Mishnah because maybe our Mishnah is talking about where no reasons can get. The Maharsha asks a fundamental question, which is, I think it's the only pshat. The Maharsha says, let's say we were to be concerned for mice. What would you do? What would you do? Let me ask you the question. The Mishnah says you're going to be worried about mice. Let's say you had to worry about mice. So what would you do about it? Let's see. Says the Maharsha, what you'd have to do is, which maybe will answer your question, that no, what would help you? Let's say, for example, this is my house, right? Imagine this has got 4 rooms. I go to that room, not a drop of chametz. Go to the next room, right? I go from A to B, and I see in B there's no chametz. So how does that help me? By the time I finish B, maybe the mouse took from C to A and put chametz there. Says the Maharsha that if we were to be choshesh for mice, the only way to do it was to have one person in every room checking simultaneously. That would be the only way to check for chametz. And therefore the Mishnah concludes that we're not choshesh for that, because if that would be the case, you would have to have everybody in the chotzer checking the same time. Because if, let's say, I check at 9 p.m. straight after Mav, you check at 9:15 p.m. So what happened was at 9, I checked with 4 people, we've got 4-room house, the whole house got no chametz. But what happened? I leave the room and you at 9:15 check. But how do I know that at 9:05 when I finish checking that the chametz didn't go from your house to mine? So we'd have to make it that everybody in the entire courtyard or the entire city or the whole world would have to check chametz at the same time, and that would be impossible. So that is how he explains Shatana Mishnah. It's important just to get it clear. The Mishnah says don't have to check everywhere simultaneously. Or as Tosfos says, the Gabriel from our Mishnah, you don't have to be concerned in a place where you've got access for mice, even if you've got access for mice. And even if you check one room to the next, it is okay, because otherwise it would be impossible.
Why would we care about chotzer to chotzer? We would need to check chametz.
No, we mean chotzer from a house. I thought you meant, no, short question. From one house in the chotzer to the next house in the chotzer. It means, let's say we all live around one chotzer, and I check a different time from you, so then it will come from, it doesn't mean in the chotzer, you're right, you know.
Also, why would you have a problem? Why do you have to go to the whole thing of everyone checking at once rather than say, well, once you checked it, you can't think of mice, you can't factor in mice.
Why?
Mice are animals, what are you supposed to do?
No, the Mishnah says you don't have to. Why don't you have to? Because it's impossible. It says the Maharsha, it's mashma that without the impossibility of chotzer lechotzer it would be possible. How would it be possible?
How would it be possible?
So that's the Maharsha answers. What you do is get 4 people to go into 4 different rooms.
No, but I'm saying as on a rolling thing. So mice don't come once and walk off.
No, but if, let's say, we would only say the house, it wouldn't be a problem. Everybody would get 4 people around the house, check the house, and it would be okay.
But the same problem will rearise.
Oh, so that's what Mishnah's answering. You can't do that for the house because you've got a problem. What about the city? Okay, let's get the Gemara into that. Oh, it says, the only reason is because we haven't seen a mice taken. Or chazina de shoka. If you actually see a mouse going from one room to the next with a slice of bread, you have to check again. And that's actually called down Mechaba. Now let's see the b'dikas chametz. And after you finish doing b'dikas chametz, you see a mice toddling into your house with a slice of bread, you have to check again to find it. Why? Name ochles say, why should I be choishesh? What did I see? I saw a mouse taking a slice of bread into my house. I'll assume I ate it. Miloi Tanan, did we not learn? The Mishnah is always referring to the fact that the house of a goy is Tommy. Why is the house of a goy Tommy? Because, you could be right. The Mishnah says because they have miscarriages, and what happens is they don't bother to bury them properly, they leave them in the house. Now, is a goy metame be'oyal? What's the din? A good machlokes between Tanakama and Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon says that a house is a goy is not metame in the house, only a yid. Why? Because it says this Odom ki yomus ba'oyal. If a man dies in a tent, atem kuim Odom, ve'nev gechum kuim Odom. So according to Reb Shimon, why would the goyish house be tomei? So Rashi asks the question, and Rashi answers because you might come to touch a nefel, a miscarriage, without realizing. Maisa, we actually pass connect from Shimon that a goy is not metame b'oil. The Chachamim hold that a goy is metame b'oil
Why can't come in the trees?
because we're choshesh for Yiddish Shabbat. Now, one very small nekuda is like this, that the famous nekuda, they asked the question, Atim kurim Adam and Evdichim kurim Adam. You know the famous story that when Beis trial in Russia about 100 years ago, just over 100 years ago now, they asked the question, how can you say that you are called human beings and we are not? So because Adam is the only one which is only said in the singular, never in the plural. There's such thing as Adamim or Adamois. Ish, you got Anoshim, Gever, Kvorim, but Ben Adam, Bnei Adam, but Adam by itself you don't have in the plural. Atim kurim Adam, that he said one Yid in one side of the world is suffering, and we're all one single unit. Let's just see the Rashi inside. Milu tam seches olos v'dusik v'chomim timeim v'shekuv niflem potem v'akim etamim misos nafroy lo abonon ulabshim ben Yochai nami dama akiv v'chomim einam etamim mago masam moidahu delay imet enem etumas oyel delay miku Adam they're not called Adam. That's the Rashi summarizes it. So what happens is if you've got a Goisha house, you've got to assume that there are Nephalim, you've got to be Choshesh that there's Nephalim, and a Kohen is not allowed to go into a Goisha house. Tesis Paskins, second thesis, that nowadays we're more makeful about it. Otherwise, as a landlord or something, you won't be able to ever visit a Goisha house because you have to be Choshesh for all of this. Okay. So Medoy is coming to me. The Kamo Yishba Medoy. How long does the guy need to live there? Via Medoy Tzorich Badika, that we should now need to check it out before we go in. Aboim going for 40 days. Because a baby less than 40 days old is not possible. Baby, it takes 40 days for baby to be created. 40 days. The Mishnah says even if he's not married. Why even if he's not married? That's just because going Choshton's nos, therefore even if he's not married, we're Choshesh that maybe it was Mizana, had a miscarriage and left it. And says the Mishnah, if it's a house which has got access to weasels and chazerim, you do not need to check. So let's summarize the question of our Mishnah, the Gemara. The Mishnah says that if you see, the Mishnah will medayek from our Mishnah, that if you're not mechuyev to be choshesh, you don't have to be concerned, perhaps a mouse came. But if you know that a mouse came and took a slice of bread into your house, you're mechuyev to check your house again. Why? Because we assume he took it in, and we don't assume that he ate it. But regarding a house of a goy, if we see that there's a weasel there, we don't say you're not allowed to go in because maybe there's a neffel, maybe there's a miscarriage there. Rather, what we say is that the weasel ate it.
There you don't even see it in his mouth, do you?
Oh,
It's even less of a.
right. No, you said that as it sits in the mouth. Flesh which is easy to be eaten, they don't leave. But lechem meshayra. Tesis points out the third tesis that's only basov nefolim. The flesh of a miscarriage is a nefel. What's a good word for a nefel in English? Fetus. Fetus flesh is very soft, and therefore it's very likely that it will be consumed. So again, our Mishnah is talking about bread, and since it's talking about bread, it takes time to eat it, and therefore, if you see a mouse take a slice of bread into your house, you have to do b'dikas chametz again. But there, it's talking about flesh. Flesh it gets consumed. Says the Gemara, Marova, hi mai. What's the comparison? And the Gemara's tells us very straightforward. Here, once you know the mouse took a slice of bread in your house, you're 100% sure that there's chametz in your house. You have a sofek, perhaps the mouse ate it. And there we have a principle in Sofek Meitz Midei Vadai. There, are we 100% sure that the guy had a miscarriage? No, could easily be that he didn't. Are we 100% sure that he's got a dead body lying on the premises? No. So you've got a sofek, perhaps there's a dead body. Plus you've got another sofek, perhaps the weasel or the chazer took it away. So it's a sofek, a negative sofek. A sofek against a sofek is okay. A sofek negative vada is no good. So let's see the Gemara inside. How can you compare? Perhaps it happened, perhaps it never happened. And on the sad, if it did happen, maybe he ate it. We saw definitely the mouse or the weasel taking a slice of bread into the house. Who told us that the mouse ate it? Have a suffix, the vadai, and suffix mates with a vadai. So therefore, this is Rava's malach, which we're going to discuss now for some time. The Rava says, whenever you've got a suffix, you're not sure if something went wrong. Even if you only have a suffix against it, it's okay. But when you've got a suffix negative, a suffix against it, another suffix, ain't suffix, then we say a suffix is moitz midei suffix. So then now the Gemara discusses this Yesod. What's Rabba's Yesod? Ain't Sofik Mitzvah Vada. It actually comes up a few places in Shas, and in fact, each time the Gemara goes through a lot of the same questions again. It's like one of these sugyas which comes up again and again. Ain't Sofik Mitzvah Vada. Does a Sofik not exclude a Vada? Well, Tanya, Chovesh Shemes, a Talmud Chacham that dies. Now, the halacha is that when a person buys fruit, is mechuyev to take Tumas HaMaisos. This Talmud Chacham, on the day that he died, went to the shop, bought himself a hulu with the fruit and veg, and then he died. Now the question is, are we choishish that he had not had time to take Tumas HaMaisos? Maybe he never had time to take Tumas HaMaisos. So can the Yoshim eat it without taking Tumas HaMaisos? He left a drawer full of fruit, even if he got it on that day. You can be sure that they have been taken to Samaisis. We are sure, 100% sure, that at one stage these fruit needed to Samaisis taken from it. The Sophic Musan, the Sophic no Musan, and we're not sure did this Talmud Chacham take to Samaisis not. Because the Sophic waits with a Vadai, and we see that the Sophic has the ability to take away from a Vadai, to exclude a Vadai. So therefore we see that even in a case when you're sure there's a problem and you're doubtful, maybe there's a solution, we're still okay with it. Says the Gemara the same thing over here. When the bread came into the house, bread came into the house, you're not sure if the mouse ate it, so it should be okay. Says the Gemara, no. Hasam vadai vevadaihu. It's definitely. Why? The vadai me'asri k'dob chanina chayzod, omar chanina chayzod chazaka. One can be sure al chover on the Talmud Chacham that he does not allow something to come out of his hand which has not been fixed. Meaning that he makes sure when he has something in his house that 100% sure it will be fixed, and it's not a sophic when they took to Musamaisis. It's a bad that they took to Musamaisis. Rashi writes the Sefer Horus, very nice Sefer. He writes that he brings from the Meiri, actually, I should say, quotes from the Meiri. That it's only if you died a normal death. If you died an accidental death, then perhaps he was planning to do it and never had the chance. A person knowing that he's going to die will make sure, because he knows he's lying in his deathbed, he makes sure to avoid. There's the famous story of Salanta, he's lying on his deathbed, was concerned about his gabba, that he shouldn't be living with a dead body, how will he cope with it? Because Tamsachov knows he will be sure to do it right. And I once mentioned that if you look at must say about 30-40% of all Haskamas will have this line of the Gemara inside. Which function knows used to write this. When you see the Sefer and they asked him for Haskama, he used to say, you see, if you read the Haskamas, I never had time to read the Sefer. But Chazaka, we are sure that the Talmud Chacham never allows something to come out of his house which is not fixed correctly. So therefore, I'm sure that the Sefer is good. This is a nice expression to use if you ever look at the Vice's Lord says that we're 100% sure and it's not a Sophic and Vadai. Says the Gemara, say the Sophic, it's a Sophic. What did you say? The fruit that came into the house, it's Vadai. It's 100% sure that you need to some ice. Says, well, it's not, it's a Sophic. Why? It's possible that the fruit never became Teva. That means like this. When a person grows, let's say it's got grapes. So what happens? A wheat. So he has to take Tumas HaMaisos. There is a method which a person can avoid taking Tumas HaMaisos forever min HaTorah. What is the method to avoid taking Tumas HaMaisos? Bring it into your house. How do you bring it into your house? Oh, right. So the one moment to discuss it more length, here is very short. Now what happens is, the way the Lord describes it is like this. The normal way to take Tumas HaMaisos is you first do miruach. Miruach is when you make it into a pile and it's considered to be ready grain, and then you bring it into your house. But if you leave the grain with its chaff, you don't thresh it, and then you bring it into your house, and only then you thresh it, so then min HaTorah you never need to take Tumas HaMaisos. You're completely part from Tumas HaMaisos forever and ever. So therefore, says the Gemara that maybe that's what happened over here, and therefore you cannot say it's a Sophic negative Vadai, but a Sophic negative Sophic. The Rishonim all get very disturbed. We're talking about Talmud Chacham over here, and surely a Talmud Chacham is not going to use this dray, this shvindle, this crooked way of avoiding taking Tumas HaMaisos. The Kiddush Yaakov is about it. So some say be'emes taka, that it's not a train. There's nothing wrong with it. It's the Torah said that this is the way to do a sabaisis, and if you don't do like that, you're potter. You've actually done it. You're potter. And then some say that sometimes the Chava himself had reasons where he wasn't sure if he would be able to take Tumas Hamaisis. Let's say he knew that he was dying, so he was worried about it. So therefore, in this particular case, he did it because of the problem. But either way, the Gemara is saying that it's not definite that needs Tumas Hamaisis taken, and therefore a suffix waits with a vadai. It's a suffix and a suffix. Perhaps he never did it. Well, it says, person can do a trick with his produce, or brings it in with its shaf. Why does he mention the animal eating? Why not the human being? Because midrabanon, Chazal said that you have to eat, and therefore, you have to take with some isos. So therefore, the animals are potter. So therefore, even Abisha agrees that midrabanon, if you sit down and eat properly, you'll have to take some isos. So this is only a heter for derivaisis. Fake Rashi, so Rashi, you still got the problem with drabanon. How can we rely? Says the Rashi that suffix drabanon is lekula. That is obvious. The suffix means to be devada. It's a suffix drabanon. Since it's a suffix drabanon, it's okay. Teresis is disturbed that in our Mishnah, when the mouse goes in and he takes a slice of bread, is it a suffix deraisa or suffix drabanon? Why is it suffix deraisa? Oh, so it depends. If you did bittul, so therefore it's not yours, it's only a suffix derabanon, which Chazal will worry that maybe you'll come to eat it. If you didn't do bittul, it'll be a suffix deraisa. And that's Bemis Tesis' question over here. That's the Tesis next to Kadesh to be Moicheles. Tesis asks Lemaisa that Rashi Leshitose, that holds the reason we do B'tikas Chometz is because of the Issa Bali Ro Bali Motze, so he's okay. Because midiraisa you can do bittul and get out of it. No, sorry. Because Rashi Salishtos is no good. Because it's something deraisa. No, so then you do a bittul, you still got the problem of he's got a cheshbon that he works it through. Sorry. Sorry. So it says. So it says because the base the bedika the deraisa you do bittul, so you're only left with the drabanon of the chashash rakim to eat it. So therefore, it is no good. So therefore, it's a kasha on Rashi that he says that over here by Sofik you can rely on the chazaka. Okay. So the Baisa the Gemara asks the kasha that you've got from this Baisa of from the Talmud Chacham that dies, and the Gemara gave two answers. Either we are 100% sure the Talmud Chacham takes two Samaisis, or it's a Sofik where they need to take two Samaisis in the first case because maybe he brought it in an unusual manner, and therefore there's no chiv to a Samaisis altogether. Another kasha. A shivcha of an oppressive person, a difficult person. What happened was she miscarried and she dropped the fetus into a pit, top of testament place. The Kohen came, they hit its boy, and he went to look, laid down Zocharu in the cave. He wanted to know if the fetus was male or female. What's that if it's male or female? Right. How long is she stopped before? And the Gemara there, Rashi, when he asked the kasha, this Kohen was a fool. Why was he a fool? No, it was a Yid. Right? The Matzik was an oppressive person, but he was what? Because he could become tummy. Right. Oh, you ask me inside the shivcha. Look at the bottom two. It says Tesam Adalef. Today's asks the kasha. It's a shivcha betama beleda. It says maybe she was dropping the fetus of the woman in charge. It wasn't her fetus. Okay. So he was a fool, this Kohen, for looking, because if there would have been a fetus there, then he would have become Tomei, and he's not allowed to become Tomei. He looked, and he didn't manage to see anything, and they said that he's toy. Why? Because often there's weasels.
Depends how long after she got the baby.
No.
Takes time.
Oh, so Rashi explains that what happens is like this, that go a pit, and they have these like little burrows which they go through, and the burrows are how big? A tefach. The halacha is if there's a tefach height between them, once they take the fetus into the burrow, so then what happens is if there's a tefach height, the tumor doesn't go up. So therefore, they've taken the fetus away. So we see over here that we know for definite that there was something tummy in that pit. 100% she dropped the fetus there. And we're not sure whether it got dragged away. And we say that it's okay. So why in our Mishnah, when it comes to Chometz, Are we concerned if something is a thing? So therefore, we don't know what that happened yet because it's something makes with a vadai. Says the Gemara. What is? No, because the Gemara. Yeah, I assume because the fetus is slightly bigger than a slice of bread that we're discussing. Bardalus, what's a bardalus? A leopard. Polecat. Okay. Whatever it is, it's a bigger thing. We're talking about bigger. Okay. So we see over here that. So what happens is we've got over here Badai that there was a fetus in the pit, and the Sophic take it away. It says well later we're not discussing a case where she definitely dropped a fetus, and when a woman miscarries very early, then when we're not sure if it's a real fetus or not, she's not tummy. It's not considered as a whole sugya nida. Whether it's considered a human being or not, you have to look carefully. So therefore over here, it wasn't a question of that definite a fetus, whether it's male or female. Rather, it was a question whether it was a fetus altogether. Perhaps it wasn't. So I have a suffix with suffix. Therefore, it's a suffix whether there was a fetus altogether. And even if there was, we've got another suffix. Maybe they took it away. Pray the Gemara that the Kohen, when he looked, what did he look to see if it's male or female? Which is mashma that he was sure that it was a fetus. It was only not sure whether it was male or female. According to you, we weren't even sure whether there was anything there at all. The question was only whether it's male or female. More changes the price. Later, he wanted to verify two things. Whether it's considered like a bit of piece and not a fetus at all. In Nephilim, whether it was actually a fetus. And if it was a fetus, he wasn't sure. There was two things he wanted to verify. He wanted to verify whether at all it is a fetus, and if it is, whether it's male or female. And that's why it was only a suffix. And since it's a suffix, it's a suffix mitzvah suffix. Now, in our Mishnah, when you saw them take a piece of bread, it's a suffix mitzvah vadai. So that is one answer of the Gemara that we're talking about. We're not 100% sure she dropped a fetus. It's a suffix. And we're not sure whether a weasel took it away. So therefore, it's a suffix which is mitzvah from a suffix. The Gemara's next answer is more straightforward, but the Gilsa is more difficult, how to fit into the words. The answer is like this. In our Mishnah, the question is, did the mouse eat it or take it into a house and leave it somewhere in the house? That is a doubt. We don't know. But whether the weasel took the nephil away, the fetus away, that's what you ask, Moshe. How long is it after? It takes time to eat it. That we're sure about. Because there's two different things. When an animal sees something of food, what it does is it straight away, there's not a doubt whether it will take it or not. It sees free food, of course it will take it straight away. But rather what it means is that, but we don't know whether he ate it immediately. So therefore when the Kohen looked over the pit, we don't really care whether the chud has eaten it or not. Because as long as the chud has taken it into its bottom and it's out of the pit, so therefore the Kohen is not tummy. Whether the fetus is still around or not is less significant to us. So the Gemara says, therefore you can't compare to our Mishnah where the question is, has it been finished, eat it, whether it's been completely eaten, to over there where the question is only has been dragged away. Being dragged away takes much, much quicker than being consumed. Says the Gemara, also he with the chuldo badas mitzuin shom since they exist there. Vadai go by ishaita. Of course, by that time they put it away. Why? It is true that sometimes they leave over the food, they don't finish eating all the food. We can be sure that they dragged it away. Then the it's the same notion with a bit more expression. That whether they finish eating them, that we're not sure about. But definitely we are sure that it's completely been dragged away. So regarding the question is like this. The question was, do we say Safrit with Vadai? Rava sticks to his guns that we don't say Safrit with Vadai, or we pass like Rava, that if we see a mouse going in and we're not sure if it ate, you have to predict again. Over here, by this Nefel, we have two reasons to be made. Either because we're not 100% sure that there was a Nefel altogether, perhaps it wasn't the fetus altogether. Alternatively, because then we don't need the animal to have eaten it. All we need is the animal to drag it away. To drag it away takes much quicker. So now the Gemara says, goes back to the deal. We made a deal Kedar Mishnah. What was the deal Kedar Mishnah? That the whole Mishnah is discussing that we're not sure if a mouse came, then it's okay. But if you're sure a mouse came, you have to do B'dika again. But if you're not sure, let's say you're not sure, let's say, for example, you've got a house and you wonder, maybe mice came, what's the deal? You do not need to check it again. Do we say that you don't need to be choshesh? Maybe a mouse dragged it. Tani say for the later Mishnah is going to say, after you finish B'dikas Chametz, you should leave it in a hidden spot. They should need to do B'dika again. It's one of the halachas. That after you finish B'dikas Chametz, what you should do is you should put all the bread that you have, which you're planning to burn the next morning, or that you're planning to eat for breakfast the next morning, you should put it in one secluded spot. Why? Because if you leave it around, we're concerned that a mice will come and take from it, and then you'll have to B'dikas Chametz again. So how can you say in our Mishnah we're not concerned about mice taking from room to room? The next Mishnah tells us that when you finish B'dikas Chametz, you have to hide the Chametz, that we are concerned that mice will take it. Omar Abaya, lo kasha. Hobar Boso. That Mishnah is discussing after B'dikas Chametz on the 14th. Hobish Lusha also. Our Mishnah is talking about the 13th, the night of the 14th. Bishloisha also the shchiach vifta mikulabati. The mice has got bread wherever he wants to go. Everybody's houses is full of bread. Lo matzna. It doesn't start hiding his own slice. Barbosa. By the time it comes to the 14th in the morning, the shchiach vifta. There's no bread allowed. Bekulu in mikulabati matzna hides. I don't know if you have got this story. What's it called? The mitzvah tape. There was about how's it go? One morning I woke up. There was no crumbs to have except for matzah and wine. I can't remember the words exactly. So basically what happens is it suddenly runs out. Since it runs out on the 14th, so then it has to be extra careful. So therefore like this, on the 13th, the night of let me look at when I'm doing B'dikas Chametz, I'm not going to take from one room to the next. It's got Chametz in that room. Why should you take from one room to the next? But if I leave it around, then the middle of the night, the mice will come, and now there's no Chametz anywhere because I've finished doing B'dikas Chametz. So I've left it, if I've not put it secluded in a box, but rather I leave it in an open box, what am I choshesh? Then the mice will come and take it because now the mice is a shortage of bread. Now the world doesn't like this. Amarova, the Yehuda Nevi'ohi is a Yehuda prophet. The Yoda that knows, the Yehuda that night the 14th for the Ofiat Be'ota, or Meshaya or Metama. The more understands it's not just a shortage of bread, it knows that there's going to be a long shortage of bread. From the morning of Pesach, you eat your breakfast till the night. No, because you start baking matzahs night of Pesach. It doesn't mind eating matzah, you saw it. It might eat matzah and wine. So what happens is it's only the afternoon. So therefore, what happens is the afternoon it's a struggling. I mean, the way I explained it was a bit maybe not biasing to say there's a lack of bread. Rob is saying that you're right. What's the lacking of bread is because you've got a bit of bread now which you're going to burn, and then later you're going to start baking your matzahs. So the mouse is the amount of mephoshim that I say all say the same lashon. I saw Vlash says after I saw much earlier. I'm surprised it doesn't quote it to Shash. Everybody says the same line. The Gemara could have said, "V'chichuda does it have ruach hakodesh? Does the chuda know the future?" Why does it use the Russian "V'chichuda nevi'ah is chuda prophet"? Why? Because there was a Navi called Chulda. There was a tremendous Nevi'ah called Chulda. She lived at the time of the first base of English towards the end, and she was a very big Chulda. She was a big. So what I was saying is this Chulda, is this the Nevi'ah Chulda? It's a play on the words. But the Ma'aseh like this. Roma says, do they know that there's a shortage of bread and they're not going to bake until the night? And Meshaya or Metama is going to guard it. You have to hide it. It's not because we're scared that if you leave the chametz around, when you wake up in the morning, you're going to have to do B'dikas Chametz again. That's not the problem. The problem is that you may see the mouse in front of you taking a slice of bread. And that we did say, that if you see a mouse taking a bread, then you have to be chosh. Again, our Mishnah says that barring any sights of mice taking bread, you don't have to be concerned. You check one room, you go to the next room, and then the next room. You don't have to be concerned that maybe there's bread going behind your back. No, you don't have to be chosh for that. The next Mishnah says that when you finish doing B'dikas Chametz, put it in a secluded spot. The question of the Gemara is, why should you put a secluded spot? You just told me I don't have to be worried about mice. Yes, you don't have to be concerned. Maybe mice will come. But if a mice actually comes in front of you and takes it, you're going to have to do B'dikas Chametz again. So the Mishnah is telling you good advice that makes sure that you put it in a way that mice won't be able to access it. Tanya Kivositi Rova, we have advice exactly like Rova. Person wants to eat chametz after finishing chametz. What should he do? What he leaves over Yanichenu Betzina, he should leave it in a private spot. That we're scared maybe a weasel will come and take in front of us. So we're discussing a situation where you can actually see the weasel taking. Then you need to do b'dikas chametz. But if you're not sure about the b'dikas chametz, you're not certain, then you don't need to be choishesh. It's a gzir that you put out 10 slices of bread and you only find 9. That means our Mishnahs talk about a case. You don't know how much chametz you've got in your house. You've got no idea. So you go from one room, you check it. You go from A to B, from B to C, C to D. You don't have to be choishesh after you finished A. And when you went to room B, maybe the mouse took from room C and put it back into A, and now you have to go back to A. You're not choishesh for such a thing. But the next Mishnah, which says you hide it, is discussing a situation when you know you've got exactly 10 slices of bread left in the box. You wake up the next morning, you find there's only 9. So now you know that a mouse came, and therefore you have to do b'dikas chametz again. So basically the Moy and Rav is saying the same answer. That our mission is discussing that you're not to be choishesh, perhaps something will go wrong. Masha'en Kain, when we know something went wrong. Rav says we know something went wrong because you saw the mouse actually taking it in front of you. Rav Moy says that you know something went wrong because you put aside 10 slices, you wake up to only find 9. That is Rav Moy. Abaya's tells is there's a difference which time it is. That's the shaila is if it's the night, the mice are not under the weasels are not busy taking from its room. But by the time it comes next morning, there's already a lacking of bread, then they are busier. Now we're going to have a whole daf just discussing various different scenarios of mice and piles of chametz, and you're not sure what happened to them. Interesting shailas. So this is like this: Teisha tziburin shel matzah, ve'echad shel chametz. You've got 9 piles of matzah and 1 of chametz. But also achbar v'shokar, a mice came and took from one of the piles. We don't know your matzah shokar, your chametz shokar, and he came running into the house. So what happened was, you've got a house, you finished doing b'dikas chametz, and you're thrilled, you want to relax, finally finished. And then you see a mouse going to 9 piles of where area there's 9 piles of matzah, 1 pile of chametz, and he takes 1, and he comes running into the house and drops it somewhere in the house you don't know where. Do you need to now check again? Because you don't know, did he take a matzah or chametz? Says the Gemara, Hainu Teisha Chanuyos. That's the halacha of the 9 shops. There's a halacha that always we go after Roiv. So if there's 9 kosher shops and 1 shreifa shop in town, and you find a piece of meat on very old road, then you're allowed to eat it. Why are you allowed to eat it? Because we go after Roiv. Right? That's the halacha. You go after Roiv. The Gemara, the Chuli discusses the question that Bosa Shli Salim in Ayin, but there's other, that's to our Bonondika issues. But if you find meat in a town where the majority of shops are kosher, we go after the majority. Except when it's kavua. Kavua is not something which works with the logic. There is no logic to it whatsoever. It's a gzeras hakosov. It's a literally, this is what the Torah teaches us. That even though you always go after the majority, both the kula and the chumah, by the way, but when it comes to kavua, it's always mechza, and it's also bein the kula, bein the chumah, meaning that if the question is not when you find a piece of meat on very old road, but rather you went to one of the shops. There are 10 shops, and you went to one of the shops, but you're not sure which one you went into. You don't remember. And 9 are kosher, and 1 is streif. What's the halacha? It is awesome. Why? Sofik deraisa lechumah. What's the difference? The difference is whether it was kavua, that means the question is like this: when did the question arise? When you find a piece of meat on the floor, the question arises now after it's left the shop. When you took it from the shop, very well be that whoever took it from the shop knew which shop he took it from, most likely. So the only question arises now when you don't know where it came from. And when you don't know, it's called pirush. It's separated from the place of the sofik. When it's separated from the place of the sofik, we go after roiv. But when it's kavua, meaning that you know it is established exactly your question. That's kosher shop, that's a kosher shop, that's a shreifa shop. So the question now is, to which of these shops did I just go into? And I cannot remember. So the question arose when I went into the shop. And the shops, it's clear and it is established where they are. Since it's kavua, the Torah says you do not go after roiv, we say it's sofik. And if it would be a sofik d'Rabbanan, this is an interesting kula. If it would be a suffix to Rabbanon, and you've got 9 treifa shops at one kosher shop, but it's kavua, so we would say suffix to Rabbanon lekula, because even though you've got majority which is awesome, but since it's kavua, kol kavua kemechza and mechza, it's like 50-50, and therefore you'd be okay. So now regarding the question of the matzahs, it's exactly the same. If the mouse went to one of the piles, we just don't know which one of the piles. So then what's the halacha? What would you say? Let's say there's 9 matzah, 1 chometz. You don't know which pile it went to. Do you have to check your house again? It's kavua. It's kavua. Because there's 9 piles of matzah. And that's the question. That's the question. Right. That taste is asked the question. How do you taste the long taste? Why is not something to abundant here? It says could be that over here Chazal could be like the rice. But let's just get the main nakuda. If you've got 10 piles, 9 matzah, 1 chometz, and the mouse went to one of them, the question is established. It's kavua. You can see the pile of chometz, and since you can see the questions for which pile it went, so therefore it's kavua, and therefore you have to do chometz again. But let's say a piece came away from these 10 piles and it fell on the floor, and you don't know from which pile it came, and then the mouse came and took that piece and ran into the house. You do not need to check again. Why don't you need to check? Because you've got voiv. So it depends when the question became. Did it become when it went to the piles, which is kavua, or when it already separated from the piles, where it's pirush? Let's go inside. Pirush. If the slice of bread separated, also achba and the mouse came, the shock and you say for that's the end. It's not. Teisha chanuyos. 9 shops kolomoich was shchuta sell shechted meat. Bachas becheres bas in the vela. But lokach bachas memeni demes when lokach. You took from one of them, you just don't know which. Sveiko yosam. Ubenimsa. But if you don't know, you just found it. Holachacha voiv. You go after voiv. This question that you asked over here is the Rabbanon is a very, very big question. We showing them go back and forth, and I don't. We'll see later because I said later the Gemara is going to ask it on itself. We'll leave it for the moment. I said the Gemara at this stage understands it's exactly the same as Teisha Chanuyos. So it depends when the mouse took it. Did they take it from the? If the question is, we took from a pile, we saw it take. It's a question what we saw. If we saw it take it from one of the piles, then it is awesome. If we didn't say take it from one of the piles, but rather we saw it after it fell away from one of the piles, then it is mutter. Shnei tzibur, you got 2 piles. Echad shel matzah v'echad shel chometz. One of matzah, one of chometz. But if them in front of them shnei batim, 2 separate houses. Echad boduk v'echad shel einu boduk. But also shnei achborim, 2 mice came. Echad shel matzah v'echad shel chometz v'edin hayla ayil. You've got 2 houses, one which has been finished checked for chometz, and one which hasn't. And you have 2 piles, one of chometz, one of matzah, and you have 2 mice. One mouse took from one pile and ran into a house, and one took from another one. And you don't know, did the mouse which took from the matzah go into the checked house? And the one that took from chometz went to the house which hasn't been checked, which is marvelous, because the house which has been checked got matzah, it's fine. The house which hasn't been checked, it's got chometz. And that's also fine, because it's going to check anyway in a minute. Or do we say maybe not? Maybe the mice did not know which house had had particular chometz yet. And the halacha is that we assume that what? That it's a suffix. It's a suffix. You have to do the chometz again. Here we have a principle that a thing always goes to what is most similar to it. And therefore, if you've got a question, where does something fall into? We assume that matzah went into the checked house and the chometz went into the non-checked house. Says the Gemara, Hainu shtei kupos is exactly the same of two baskets. That's nan shtei kupos, 2 baskets. Achas shel chulin, achas shel tuma. One's full of chulin produce, one's full of tuma. But if they stay so in front of them, you've got 2 measures. Achas shel chulin, achas shel tuma. But not for elu l'torich elu. And one measure of chulin fell into one basket, and one measure of tuma fell into one basket. And we don't know which one fell into which mutorin. The truma is truma and the chulin is chulin. Why? Shani oimer that I say chulin l'torich chulin naflu, but tuma l'torich tuma naflu. Again, this is not something which can be explained with a logic. There's no way to say scientifically that if you've got 100 baskets and 50 of them are chulin, 50 of them are tuma, and you mix up loads and loads of produce and you drop them in, that it's more likely that chulin will fall into chulin, tuma will fall into chulin. It's a special color that Chazal established. That's how we be like. Says the Gemara, when do I say that? Bechametz the top of your Domad Aleph. Which one's Rabbanon? Bechametz the Raisa Miyamino. Says Ma'at V'tikas Chametz the Raisa to Rabbanoni. To be the Raisa to Baba Sagile. In the end of the day, the Raisa is enough to do bittul. And since the Raisa is enough to do bittul, so therefore over here it's only a Rabbanon Dikasha. And therefore it's okay. So if he says like this, that's one of the videos we see. We're stopping here. Sometimes it's always. He says like this that one of the videos we see on Rosh Hashanah. Some people have anything to say. That which you said is mutter Hashem. I made asa. That which you said is asa is mutter. And there's a famous question. What's the famous question? That Bishleim, that which Hashem said is asa. If I say it's mutter, you've done an aver. If Hashem says it's mutter and you say it's asa, no, what's kafarach? So you said it's asa. What's so bad? There's many answers, but once you're machmir on certain things, you put the wrong priorities, you'll end up wasting time. Which that is the very true answer. Vichtabelio writes this, the Desla. The Asher said, perhaps it's for this problem. You had 2 baskets, and you decided to be machmir that one of them is truma. But really, it wasn't truma. And then you had 2 bowls of food. One was chulin, one was truma, and they fell in. And you said to yourself, the chulin fell into chulin, and the fell into a truma. Now, had you not been machmir that it's truma, they would have both been chulin. What's the din? Let's say you'd have 2 baskets. It's an interesting halacha. If you have 2 baskets, both of chulin, and then what happens is one of chulin, one of truma fall into it. Both are asa. Why both are asa? Because you've got no logic to say which one they should have fallen into. But by you being machmir and saying that one of them is truma, now you're going to be making regarding the other one. So sometimes chumras create colors. That's what he says. Okay, so that's that. Okay, we're carrying on with Hashem and new shaila. That few of them die of 3 lines down. Any questions? It's a good time to ask. Okay. Okay. I don't know what happened. At the beginning there was more people, and then what happened was